My wife left me naked in the snow because I spilled coffee on her male assistant. 3 days later, I withdrew the $1.1 billion capital commitment that had been holding her luxury empire together. I did not bankrupt her with a phone call. I did not hack her accounts. I did not sabotage a single store. I simply stopped using my family's money to protect a company whose CEO had decided her husband's dignity was worth less than her assistant's shirt. My name is Gavin Hale. My wife, Sabrina Hale, was founder and CEO of Alvera Group, one of the fastest-growing luxury hospitality companies in North America. 27 hotels, 9 ski resorts, 6 private clubs, a restaurant division, a branded residence business. On paper, Alvera was worth almost $4.8 billion. Business magazines called Sabrina ruthless, elegant, and impossible to intimidate. They were right about all three. What those profiles rarely explained was how aggressively Alvera had expanded during the previous 5 years. Sabrina hated slow growth. If one resort performed well, she wanted 3 more. If a hotel opened in Aspen, she wanted Jackson Hole, Park City, and Whistler before competitors finished reading the press release. Growth like that required capital. A lot of it. That was where my family came in. The Hale family did not own Alvera. That distinction would become important. We owned Stonegate Capital Partners, a private investment company my grandfather built from commercial real estate and transportation holdings. Stonegate held about $2.7 billion in assets. I managed it with an independent 5-member investment committee. Over the years, Stonegate invested approximately $430 million directly into Alvera through preferred equity and development financing. More importantly, we had committed up to another $1.1 billion to Alvera's acquisition of Borealis Lodging, a distressed portfolio containing 11 high-end mountain properties. The acquisition was supposed to transform Sabrina's company. If it closed, Alvera would become the largest privately controlled luxury mountain resort operator in the United States. Every analyst loved the story. Sabrina loved it more. There was one detail she increasingly forgot. The $1.1 billion was not hers. It was not even mine alone. Stonegate's investment committee had approved a conditional commitment. Final funding depended on updated diligence, leverage limits, and execution of definitive documents. Until those conditions were satisfied, Stonegate could walk. Sabrina knew that. So did her assistant. His name was Adrian Cross. 33. Former investment banking analyst. Perfect suits. Perfect teeth. The type of man who said, "Circle back," without irony. Sabrina hired Adrian 14 months earlier as executive assistant. Within 6 months, he was attending acquisition meetings. Within 9, he was reviewing investor presentations. By the first anniversary of his employment, people had stopped calling him an assistant unless they were looking at the organizational chart. He traveled everywhere with Sabrina. New York, London, Vancouver, Zurich. Sometimes I went. Usually I did not. When I questioned why Adrian needed access to financing discussions involving Stonegate, Sabrina called me territorial. He coordinates everything. He works for you. Yes. He does not work for Stonegate. I know that. Then stop letting him speak as though our commitment is guaranteed. She rolled her eyes. Gavin, your family has funded every major expansion we've done since Tahoe. That does not make future funding automatic. See? This is what I mean. What? You always need to remind everyone the money is yours. It was not even technically mine. It belonged to Stonegate. But that difference had stopped mattering to Sabrina. She heard boundaries as insults. Adrian learned that quickly. He became very good at translating every no from me into evidence that I did not believe in her. The night everything changed happened at Alvera's flagship ski resort outside Jackson Hole. Sabrina had invited executives, lenders, Borealis representatives, and several investors for a 3-day transaction retreat. Stonegate sent me and our chief investment officer, Malcolm Price. The final dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening. Snow had been falling since late afternoon. By 9, almost 10 inches covered the terraces outside the main lodge. The temperature had dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. After dinner, I went upstairs to change. I had been in a suit since 7 that morning and planned to spend the rest of the night in the private spa level below our suite. I showered. Wrapped a towel around my waist. Then realized I had left my phone on the desk in the adjoining sitting room. When I walked out, Sabrina was there. So was Adrian. He stood beside our fireplace with a laptop open on the table. At 10:30 at night. In our private suite. I stopped. What is he doing here? Sabrina barely looked up. We're finishing tomorrow's lender deck. In our room? The conference room is being reset. There are 40 other rooms in this hotel. Adrian gave me the little smile I had started hating. I can leave if it's a problem. Yes. Sabrina looked up. Gavin. What? He needs 15 minutes. He can have 15 minutes somewhere else. Her expression changed. That look. The one that said I had embarrassed her in front of an employee. Adrian closed his laptop halfway. It's fine, Sabrina. I noticed the coffee sitting near his elbow. Then noticed my phone beside it. I walked around the table to grab it. Adrian moved at the same time. His elbow hit my forearm. The coffee tipped. Most of it went directly down the front of his white shirt. He jumped backward. Jesus. The cup hit the carpet. I immediately reached for a towel from the bar. Sorry. Adrian pulled the wet shirt away from his skin. What the hell? I said I'm sorry. That was hot. Are you burned? I don't know. Sabrina was beside him instantly. Not me. Not the glass scattered near my bare feet. Him. Take the shirt off, she said. I'm fine. Adrian. He unbuttoned it. His chest was red. No blistering. No obvious burn. Still, hot coffee hurts. I knew that. I'll call the resort medic. Adrian looked at me. You could have just asked me to move. I stared at him. You think I did that deliberately? You were angry I was here. I reached for my phone. You shoved my arm. No, I didn't. Sabrina turned. Gavin, stop. Stop what? Making excuses. It was an accident. Adrian shook his head. Forget it. No, Sabrina said. I'm not forgetting it. She picked up the room phone and called security. I genuinely thought she was requesting the medic. She wasn't. Send 2 people to the presidential suite. I looked at her. Why? She hung up. You need to leave. I laughed. I'm standing here in a towel. Then go back into the bathroom and get dressed. That would have been unpleasant but ordinary. Then Adrian said. Maybe I should leave. He's obviously upset. Sabrina looked at him. No. You have work. That sentence told me exactly who she was removing. 2 security officers arrived. Both knew me. One was named Travis. He had worked the property for 4 years. His face changed when he saw me barefoot in a towel. Mr. Hale? Sabrina pointed toward the hallway. Escort Gavin out of this suite. Travis looked confused. Ma'am? He assaulted an employee. I stared at her. Assaulted? You intentionally spilled hot coffee on Adrian. No, I didn't. Adrian said nothing. That was the moment he could have corrected her. He didn't. Travis looked miserable. Mr. Hale, maybe we can. Sabrina cut him off. No. He leaves now. I pointed toward the bedroom. My clothes are in there. You're not going back near Adrian. He's standing in my suite. It is an Alvaro-owned suite. I almost admired the absurdity. So I'm supposed to leave in a towel? Security can get your things later. The second officer looked at Sabrina. Chief, it's snowing hard outside. We can take Mr. Hale to another room. Sabrina's jaw tightened. Apparently even that sounded too accommodating. I want him off the executive floor. Fine, I said. Put me in another room. Then Adrian finally spoke. He should probably cool down first. I looked at him. His expression was perfectly calm. He knew exactly what he had done. Sabrina turned to security. Take him to the spa entrance. He can wait there until I decide what room to assign. The spa entrance was in a detached building across the courtyard. Travis said immediately. That exterior corridor isn't heated. It's 30 seconds. Barefoot. In a towel. In a snowstorm. I looked at my wife. Are you serious? She crossed her arms. Maybe 30 seconds in the cold will help you understand that you cannot humiliate my employees because you're jealous. There it was. Not safety. Not separation. Punishment. I looked at Adrian. His shirt was off. A resort medic was now examining a patch of red skin that would later be documented as a superficial first-degree burn. He looked back at me. And smiled. Barely. But I saw it. So did Travis. That mattered later. I could have refused. Security had no legal authority to drag me into snow merely because Sabrina was angry. I could have gone into the bedroom, called police, created a scene in front of Borealis executives and lenders. Instead, I made a decision that would later surprise even me. I said, "Fine." Travis removed his own jacket. "Take this." Sabrina stopped him. "He can use a resort robe downstairs." I looked at her. Even Travis looked at her. "You're stopping him from giving me a jacket?" Her expression flickered. "Only for a second. Then." I said, "He can get a robe at the spa." I tightened the towel and walked into the hall. The elevator took forever. By the time we reached the lobby level, guests were still drinking around the fireplace. Several stared. One recognized me. I kept walking. Then the exterior doors opened. Cold hit like a physical blow. Snow drove sideways across the courtyard. Travis swore. "We're not doing this." The other guard agreed. "Sir, stay here." I should have. Instead, I looked through the glass behind us. Sabrina stood on the upper mezzanine, watching. Adrian beside her, now wearing an Alvera robe. My wife wanted me to feel something. Humiliated. Excluded. Powerless. She wanted me to understand that inside her empire, she decided who belonged. So I stepped outside. Bare feet into snow. The cold was instant and savage. 20 yards became a mile. By the time we reached the spa building, my feet were numb and my entire body was shaking violently. The doors were locked. The spa had closed at 10. Travis hit the intercom. "Nothing." "Back inside," he said. I turned. The wind caught my towel. For one horrible second, it came loose completely. I grabbed it before losing it into the storm. Not before a security camera above the spa entrance recorded everything. Not before 2 guests under the covered walkway saw me. Not before I stood practically naked in the snow outside a resort my family had helped finance while my wife stayed inside with her assistant. Travis took off his jacket anyway and wrapped it around my shoulders. This time nobody could stop him. We returned through a service entrance. He put me in a security office, gave me blankets, socks, and hot water. My feet burned as sensation returned. A resort medic checked me. Mild cold exposure. No frostbite. No lasting injury. Physically, I was fine. Something else wasn't. At 11:18, Sabrina texted. "You can have room 614 tonight. We'll discuss your behavior tomorrow." Not ours. Mine. I looked at the message for almost a minute. Then opened my laptop. Stonegate's Borealis file was saved through our secure portal. $1.1 billion capital commitment. Conditional. Final investment committee approval scheduled for Monday. Sabrina believed Monday was ceremonial. It wasn't. Buried in the most recent diligence update were 3 issues Malcolm had already flagged. Alvera had increased projected Borealis renovation spending by $210 million. The combined company's leverage would exceed the original investment threshold for at least 6 quarters. And management had begun assuming Stonegate would roll an additional $300 million preferred facility into permanent capital after closing. We had never agreed to that. Adrian's name appeared on the assumptions. Stonegate historically supports Alvera strategic expansion, funding continuity considered high confidence. I stared at the sentence. Again. My family's money treated as automatic. At 11:41, I called Malcolm Price. He answered immediately. "You okay?" "Why?" "I just got a message from one of the Borealis guys saying you walked through the lobby naked. Almost naked." "Gavin." "I'm fine." "What happened?" "Personal issue." He paused. "Then why are you calling me?" "Because I want an emergency investment committee meeting tomorrow morning." Silence. "About Borealis?" "Yes." "What changed?" The personal event made me question whether Alvera management still understands the distinction between confidence and commitment. That sounded abstract. So I gave him the corporate facts. Leverage. Renovation overrun. Unapproved permanent capital assumption. Adrian representing Stonegate support as high confidence. Malcolm became quiet. "I flagged that wording last week." "I know. You told me Sabrina understood our commitment was conditional." "I believed she did. And now?" "Now I want the committee to verify everything independently." That was all. No instruction to withdraw. No revenge order. Review. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Stonegate's investment committee convened by video. I disclosed the marital conflict before discussion. Then I recused myself from the final vote. Malcolm presented the numbers. The committee asked Elvera for documentation supporting its assumption of an additional $300 million from Stonegate. There was none. They asked whether renovation overruns had been incorporated into leverage covenants. Not fully. They asked whether Borealis sellers had agreed to any purchase price adjustment. No. At 8:43, the committee voted 4-0. Stonegate would not issue final approval under the current structure. The $1.1 billion commitment expired unless Elvera materially revised the transaction. Not cancelled out of spite. Not withdrawn illegally. Not yet earned. At 8:57, Malcolm sent the formal notice. At 9:06, the lead acquisition bank called Elvera. At 9:14, Borealis's owners requested evidence of replacement funding. At 9:22, two lenders suspended final syndication pending revised equity commitments. At 9:31, Sabrina called me. I was dressed by then. Suit, shoes, coat, everything she had denied me 12 hours earlier. I answered. What did you do? Stonegate reviewed Borealis. You pulled $1 billion. The committee declined final approval. You control the committee. No. You called the meeting. Yes. Because of last night. Last night made me look more carefully. Her breathing sharpened. You're destroying Elvera because I made you leave the suite. No. You're angry about Adrian. Yes. So admit it. I am angry. Then this is retaliation. No. I looked at the snow-covered mountain through room 614's window. Anger triggered the review. And? The numbers ended the commitment. Silence. Then Sabrina said the sentence that told me she still understood nothing. Stonegate has always funded me. Elvera. What? Stonegate funded Elvera. You know what I mean. Yes. That was the problem. For years, Sabrina had stopped hearing the difference between herself and the company. Between our marriage and Stonegate. Between my loyalty and her entitlement to my family's money. She whispered. The Borealis deal collapses without you. Then fix the structure. You expect me to renegotiate a $2 billion acquisition over one bad night? No. What do you expect? I expect you to stop treating money you don't own as guaranteed. Her voice went cold. And our marriage? I looked down at my hands. The skin around 2 toes was still red from the cold. That needs its own review. She understood. Nathan. Wrong name. She stopped. For half a second neither of us spoke. Then I heard Adrian in the background. Sabrina, the bank is waiting. My wife had just called me by another man's name. Maybe she heard it too. Maybe she didn't. I ended the call. At 9:48, Malcolm forwarded me a new email recovered from the Borealis diligence room. Adrian had sent it to Elvera's CFO 3 weeks earlier. Don't over-negotiate Stonegate. Gavin will complain, but he has never let Sabrina fail publicly. Treat the Hale capital as effectively committed and solve documentation after signing. Below it, the CFO had replied. That is not what the term sheet says. Adrian. The term sheet is legal language. I'm talking about how their marriage actually works. I read the sentence twice. There it was. The entire empire built on one assumption. That no matter what Sabrina did, I would pay the cost before I let her fall. Last night, she had tested that assumption with my dignity. This morning, Stonegate tested it with $1.1 billion. For the first time in our marriage, the answer was no. By noon, the entire Elvera executive team knew Stonegate had paused the Borealis funding commitment. Nobody knew the reason. That was intentional. I did not want my marriage becoming a corporate weapon. I did not want headlines saying, "Billionaire husband punishes CEO wife after personal dispute." Because that was not what happened. The truth was much less dramatic. A CEO had made a series of decisions based on an assumption that a major shareholder would never say no. A major shareholder finally said no. The market did not care about my marriage. Investors cared about risk. And suddenly, Elvera had a lot more of it. At 10:15 that morning, Sabrina called me again. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I remembered something my father always said. Never confuse emotional distance with strategic silence. So I answered. What? Her voice was colder this time. You embarrassed me. I looked at the phone. Not surprised. Just tired. Me? Yes. Explain. You froze the Borealis deal because you were angry. No. You expect me to believe that? Yes. A pause. Then she laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because she genuinely could not understand how I could disagree with her. You walked away from a $1 billion commitment 12 hours after a fight. A review started 12 hours after an incident. Don't play lawyer. I'm not. You know what this does to me? That sentence was important. Not Elvira. Not investors. Her. I know what this does to Elvira. You built Stonegate into a weapon. No. You finally got tired of me having power. That was the first time she said the real thing. Power. Not money. Not the deal. Power. For years, Sabrina had viewed Stonegate's investment as proof that I believed in her. She never considered that belief and control could exist separately. I never wanted power over you. Then why does it feel like you can destroy everything I built? Because you built something dependent on something you did not control. That sounds like an excuse. No. I looked at the investment report on my desk. An excuse is saying the weather ruined your mountain resort opening. I paused. A business model that assumes a conditional investor will always approve funding is a risk. She was silent. Then. You're enjoying this. No. You finally get to be the one saying no. No. You don't understand how humiliating this is. I almost laughed. Almost. Because that sentence was unbelievable. After last night. After the snow. After security. After standing barefoot outside a resort my family helped finance. You want to talk about humiliation? The line went quiet. Good. Because for once, she needed to hear it. You left me outside in a snowstorm. I told security to move you to the spa. The spa was locked. That was not my intention. You watched. Silence. I was angry. Yes. I thought you needed to calm down. You thought cold air would teach me a lesson. No. Then what was it? She did not answer. Because there was no professional explanation. No CEO explanation. No investor explanation. Only anger. Finally she said. I was wrong. It was the first apology. Small. Late. But real. I leaned back. Thank you. That's all? What do you want? I don't know. That is the first honest thing you've said today. She inhaled sharply. Then her voice softened. You really think Adrian is a problem? Yes. He's my assistant. He is not acting like one. He helped build this company. No. That irritated her. He has worked harder than anyone. He has positioned himself closer to power than anyone. That's unfair. Is it? Yes. Then why did he tell your CFO that my family capital was effectively committed? He was speaking confidently. He was speaking without authority. He believed it. That is the problem. Another silence. Then she said. I never asked him to do that. No. You believe me? Yes. That surprised her. Then why are you still angry? Because you created the environment where he thought he could. She did not respond. That was the part she hated most. Not accusation. Responsibility. At 2 p.m., Sabrina requested an emergency meeting with Stonegate. Not me. The investment committee. That was correct. I approved. At 3:30, Sabrina appeared on the video call with Elvira's CFO, legal counsel, and chief operating officer. She looked exhausted. Not weak. Sabrina rarely looked weak. But tired. The kind of tired that came from realizing confidence had hidden problems. Malcolm led the meeting. Ms. Hale, Stonegate's concern is not the acquisition itself. I know. It is the funding structure. I understand. We need clarification on why management assumed permanent preferred support beyond the signed commitment. Sabrina looked toward her CFO. Then away. Because we believed the relationship was stronger than the document suggested. Malcolm did not react. The relationship between Elvira and Stonegate. That is not a legal category. No. It cannot replace underwriting. I know. The room became quiet. That was the first time Sabrina said something investors needed to hear. I watched her carefully. Because this mattered. She was finally speaking like a CEO. Not my wife. Not someone defending herself. A CEO. We made a mistake, she said. Her CFO looked surprised. She continued. We confused historical support with future obligation. Malcolm nodded. That is the committee's concern. Can we fix it? Yes. How? He listed the requirements. Reduce renovation assumptions. Increase sponsor equity. Remove unsupported leverage projections. Obtain independent financing confirmation. No shortcuts. No family assumption. No marriage-based guarantee. Sabrina listened. Then, understood. The meeting ended. No shouting. No threats. No drama. Just business. The strangest part? That was the first normal business conversation Elvira and Stonegate had held in years. Afterward, Malcolm called me. She handled that better than expected. Yes. You still filing divorce? I looked out the window. Yes. He was quiet. Even after she admitted fault? Yes. Why? Because that was the question everyone eventually asked. How could a marriage end after an apology? Because apologies repaired moments. Not patterns. The snowstorm was not the reason. The coffee was not the reason. Adrian was not even the biggest reason. The reason was that Sabrina had slowly built a world where her decisions were protected from consequences. I was the protection. Stonegate was the protection. Our marriage was the protection. And when I stopped being the shield, she finally saw what was underneath. At 5:45, I received an email from Elvira's legal department. Not from Sabrina. From counsel. A preservation notice. They had begun an internal review of Adrian's communications. The reason? During the funding discussion, they discovered several messages between Adrian and senior executives. One stood out. It was sent 2 weeks before the snow incident. Sabrina understands Gavin emotionally. She knows he will never let Elvira fail. The family relationship is the ultimate security behind this expansion. Another executive replied. Should we have written confirmation from Stonegate? Adrian answered. We have something stronger. History. I stared at that word. History. That was exactly the trap. History was valuable. But history was not a contract. My marriage was history. My trust was history. My family's support was history. None of those things meant Sabrina owned them forever. Then another message appeared. This one changed everything. It was from Adrian to Sabrina. Don't worry about Gavin. He gets angry, but he always protects you in the end. That's why you can afford to push him. I read it twice. Then a third time. Because suddenly, the snow was not an isolated event. Adrian knew something. He knew she believed I would never truly leave. He knew she could push harder because consequences would always be absorbed by me. And maybe worse. Sabrina had never corrected him. At 7:10, she called. I answered. Did you see the messages? Yes. Her voice was different. Not angry. Not defensive. Broken. I didn't know he thought that. I believe you. You do? Yes. Then why does it feel like you hate me? I looked at the empty chair across my office. The chair where she used to sit during Stonegate meetings. I don't hate you. Then what? I don't know you anymore. That hurt her. I heard it. Because Sabrina could handle anger. She could fight anger. But disappointment was harder. I'm sorry. I know. No, you don't. She was crying now. I'm sorry for the snow. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry I believed Adrian. I'm sorry I made you feel like your family's support was something I deserved. I'm sorry I stopped seeing the difference between us. That was the closest she had come to understanding. But then she asked, can we fix this? I wanted to say yes. A part of me still did. 12 years does not disappear overnight. But I thought about the security door opening. The snow. The towel. The way she looked at Adrian first. The way she had assumed Stonegate would rescue Elvira before asking. I answered honestly. I don't know. The line stayed silent. Then. That's worse than no. Yes. Because no meant the battle was over. I don't know meant there was still something left. Just not enough. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Elvira announced a temporary delay of the Borealis acquisition. The stock dropped 11%. Analysts called it a financing confidence issue. They were right. But they did not know the full story. They did not know a CEO had spent years believing one person would always catch her. They did not know that person had finally stepped aside. And they definitely did not know that the man everyone assumed was emotionally trapped by his wife's empire was the one person who could legally and financially walk away from it. 3 days after the snowstorm, Stonegate released its final position. The Borealis commitment was terminated. Not cancelled. Not withdrawn. Terminated because conditions were not satisfied. The market understood. So did Alvera. Sabrina lost the funding. But she did not lose the company. Not yet. That would depend on what happened next. Because when Stonegate stepped away, investors began asking a different question. Not, can Alvera survive without Gavin Hale's money? The question became, why did Alvera need Gavin Hale's money so badly? And that was the question Sabrina could not avoid. The first serious problem was not the stock drop. It was the debt. Alvera had grown fast enough that every new property depended on the previous one proving the model. That worked when lenders believed the company could refinance easily. It worked even better when they believed Stonegate would step in whenever liquidity tightened. Once our commitment disappeared, those assumptions got repriced. Not cancelled. Repriced. That difference mattered. At 8:10 Monday morning, Malcolm sent me Alvera's latest debt schedule. I had seen earlier versions. This one included covenant sensitivities. Look at the maturities, he said. I did. 2 large facilities came due within 14 months. Another revolver reset pricing if Alvera's leverage crossed 5.5 times EBITDA. Under the Borealis plan, management expected temporary leverage above that threshold. Their answer had been simple. Close Borealis. Grow EBITDA. Refinance. Use Stonegate preferred capital as cushion. Without us, the sequence became much less comfortable. Is this fatal? I asked. No. Then why are you calling? Because the lenders are requesting updated forecasts. That seems normal. It is. He paused. The new forecasts don't match the ones Alvera gave us 6 weeks ago. That got my attention. How far off? Capital expenditures. How much? Almost 400 million over 3 years. I sat up. Higher? Yes. For existing properties? Mostly. Deferred maintenance? Some. Renovation promises. Club upgrades. Employee housing at 3 mountain properties. Those were real obligations. Expensive ones. The sort of costs fast-growing hospitality companies could hide in future budgets while celebrating current expansion. Did Sabrina know? Unknown. Then keep it that way until we know. Malcolm laughed quietly. You're getting annoyingly consistent about that. I'm trying. He sent the underlying file. Adrian had been copied on nearly every budget revision. So had Alvera's CFO, Elise Warren. Sabrina appeared on some. Not all. At 9:40, Alvera's audit committee requested an internal liquidity review. At 10:15, one lender froze an optional $125 million expansion accordion until updated numbers were provided. Not a default. Not a collapse. Just one more door no longer opening automatically. At 11 o'clock, Financial Television ran the headline. Alvera faces funding pressure after Stonegate exit. The word exit was exaggerated. Stonegate still owned preferred equity. We had not sold existing investments. But markets love verbs. Exit. Collapse. Crisis. War. Reality is usually slower. By lunch, Sabrina called. What do you know about the capex revision? About 400 million over 3 years. Her silence told me she had not known the full number. You already saw it? Malcolm sent it. I just got it. That's a problem. Yes. No argument. Interesting. She continued. Elise says the upgrades were spread across operating plans. That doesn't make them disappear. I know. Were they in the board forecast? Not consolidated like this. Were they in Borealis financing? No. I leaned back. So the company was buying 11 more properties while under budgeting what it already owned. Her voice tightened. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? We were investing in growth while maintenance planning sat at the property level. That sounds much better. Nathan. Gavin. Silence. Again. This time she caught it immediately. Gavin. Sorry. I said nothing. Then she whispered. I'm tired. I know. I haven't slept. That doesn't make me Nathan. No. Adrian had worked for her long enough that she was surrounded by names, schedules, crises, and constant interruptions. Still, Twice confusing me with someone else, once with a name that was not even Adrian, made something obvious. I was not at the center of her attention anymore. Maybe I had not been for years. She said, "I'm ordering a full internal review." Good. Of Adrian too. Also good. You don't sound happy. This isn't a competition. It feels like one. That is exactly what has been wrong. She went quiet. Then, what do you mean? You keep thinking if Adrian was worse, you become less responsible. I don't. You do. No. Then stop bringing him into every conversation about what you did. That landed. She breathed out. You're right. Progress again. Small. Expensive. Late. At 2:30, Alvera's board audit committee met. Because Stonegate remained a major investor, Malcolm was invited as an observer for the financing section. I stayed out. That was deliberate. By 5 o'clock, he called me. You're going to hate this. What? Adrian was more involved in capital planning than we knew. How much more? He coordinated assumptions between property finance and corporate development. That sounds like a finance role. It was. Did he have one? No. There it was. Again. Authority expanding through proximity. What did Elise say? She thought Sabrina wanted him involved. Did Sabrina? Partly. What does partly mean? She told Adrian to make sure expansion planning stayed aligned with her office. That is vague. Exactly. And Adrian interpreted it broadly. Very. Malcolm sent me an organizational chart. Officially, Adrian was executive assistant to the CEO. Unofficially, he had recurring access to corporate development, treasury, investor relations, property capital planning, executive hiring, acquisition diligence. He could not approve transactions, but he could shape which information reached Sabrina first. That mattered enormously. Then came the first real red flag. A resort renovation budget in Colorado had been cut by $18 million on paper. The board had been told the project was reprioritized. In reality, much of the spending had only been delayed 6 months. Adrian emailed the property team. Keep Phase 2 out of consolidated capex until after Borealis closes. We don't need lenders overreacting to temporary renovation density. Malcolm asked. Did Sabrina authorize that? We don't know. Then we don't assume. Right. Another email. A private club expansion in Utah. Estimated cost, $42 million. Corporate budget showed $26 million. The difference sat in a future member enhancement category. Adrian. Separate this from expansion capex. Investors are already focused on leverage. Elise Warren replied. Classification has to match accounting treatment. We cannot solve optics by relabeling spend. Adrian. Then solve it within policy. Sabrina does not want unnecessary noise before Borealis. That phrase again. Sabrina does not want. Whether she had actually said it or not, Adrian used her name like authority. At 7:20, Sabrina called. This time, she sounded furious. Did you know he was doing this? No. You saw the emails? Malcolm sent some. He made finance teams think I wanted spending hidden. Yes. I never told him to hide capital spending. I believe you. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Then why do I still feel guilty? I looked at the window. Because you gave him power without defining it. She said nothing. I continued. If you tell someone to keep everything aligned with your office, then reward him every time he makes problems disappear, eventually he learns that disappearing problems is the job. He didn't make them disappear. He moved them. Yes. Same danger. Her anger drained. I promoted him too fast. You never promoted him. You know what I mean. I did. His title stayed assistant. His influence did not. That was worse. Formal power has boundaries. Informal power often survives because nobody wants to admit it exists. Sabrina said. The board wants to suspend him. Do you? Yes. Then do it. I'm asking whether you think I should. No. What? You should stop asking your husband to decide what your board should do. Silence. Then a small, bitter laugh. Right. You're CEO. For now. That phrase was new. I heard it. Is the board questioning you? They're questioning how much I knew. Reasonable. That's easy for you to say. Yes. She became quiet. I'm scared. That was rarer than an apology. Sabrina admitted anger. Stress. Frustration. Never fear. What are you scared of? That they think I'm incompetent. Do you? No. Then answer the evidence. What if the evidence is bad? Then own the part that is yours. She laughed without humor. You make it sound easy. It isn't. I spent 15 years building Alvera. I know. You were there. Yes. You remember the first hotel? Yes. A converted historic property in Charleston. 48 rooms. Leaking roof. 3 investors. 1 lender. Sabrina had slept in the unfinished manager's office during opening week because the HVAC failed and half the rooms were unusable. She built Alvera. That history was real. Adrian did not erase it. Neither did her mistakes. She whispered. I don't want to lose it because I trusted the wrong person. Then don't tell yourself that story. What story? That trusting Adrian was the only problem. She stopped. I continued. You wanted him to make your life easier. Yes. You liked that he never challenged you the way I did. No answer. You liked that when finance said something was difficult, he came back with a way to make it possible. Still nothing. And after a while, you started treating the people who said no as obstacles. Her voice was almost inaudible. Yes. Me included. Yes. That admission hurt more than denial would have. She said. I'm sorry. I know. Stop saying you know. What do you want me to say? I don't know. There it was again. No plan. No structure. No instant solution. For once, Sabrina had to sit inside uncertainty. The board suspended Adrian that evening pending investigation. Not fired. Not accused of fraud. Suspended. His company devices were secured. His access to financial systems revoked. His executive floor badge disabled. At 8:40, Adrian called me from his personal number. I almost declined. Then answered. What? You got what you wanted. His voice was calm. Almost amused. What did I want? Me out. You did that yourself. No. You represented Stonegate support without authority. Because everyone knew it was true. It wasn't. For years it was. History. He laughed. You saw that message. Yes. You think that makes me stupid? I think it makes you dangerous. Why? Because you confused a pattern with permission. He went quiet. Then. Sabrina needed someone who actually believed in her. I felt something cold settle in me. You think I didn't? You believed in limits. Yes. She believed in expansion. That is not an answer. She outgrew you. There it was. Personal now. I let him keep talking. She hated asking your family for money. No, she hated being told it wasn't automatically hers. You always made her feel small. Interesting. You'd sit in those meetings and remind everyone Stonegate could say no. Yes. Exactly. That is what investors are supposed to do. To you, maybe. And to you? He paused. Confidence matters. Confidence without authority is how you got suspended. Silence. Then. You think she'll choose you now? The question almost made me laugh. This is not about being chosen. It always is. There was something revealing in the certainty. Adrian saw everything as position. Closer to Sabrina. Closer to capital. Closer to decision-making. Winning meant replacing someone else. I asked. Did you tell finance to keep deferred renovation spending out of consolidated capex? I told them not to create panic over timing differences. That's a yes. It's context. Did Sabrina order you to? He stopped. No. Did she know? Not specifically. There it was. I wrote the answer down. You're recording this? No. You're taking notes. Yes. Why? Because Alvera's investigation will ask. He laughed. You really think you're separate from this? Yes. You're her husband. Not for much longer. That shut him up. Then his tone changed. You filed? Not yet. But you will? Yes. For the first time, Adrian sounded uncertain. You're serious? Yes. That's bad for her. Maybe. For Alvera too. Maybe. You'd really walk away while the company is vulnerable. There it is again. What? The assumption that my marriage exists to protect her company. He said nothing. I continued. You built your entire strategy around me never allowing consequences to reach Sabrina. That's not what happened. It's exactly what happened. No. I tried to help her succeed. By making every boundary feel optional. She needed speed. She needed accurate information. She needed someone loyal. To her? Yes. Or to keeping yourself necessary. Silence. Long enough. Then Adrian said, "You're jealous." I almost felt sorry for him. "Good night, Adrian." Gavin. I ended the call. The next morning, I sent my notes to Alvera's outside counsel. Nothing more. No interpretation. No demand. Just what he said. At 11:30, Sabrina received the preliminary audit report. At 11:48, she called me. Her voice was shaking. "There's more." Of course there was. What? Adrian delayed 3 internal risk reports. I stood. What kind? One on deferred maintenance. Another breath. One on employee housing code issues. My stomach tightened. And the third? She went quiet. A resort safety review. That was different. Financial manipulation was one thing. Safety was another. What resort? Black Ridge. Alvera's largest ski property in Colorado. What issue? A lift maintenance contractor documented repeated sensor faults last season. Were they fixed? Yes. When? Eventually. What does eventually mean? Silence. Sabrina. After 3 temporary resets. I closed my eyes. Was anyone hurt? No. Did Adrian hide the report? He delayed it. For how long? 26 days. Why? Her voice broke. Because Borealis lenders were touring Black Ridge that month. For the first time since this started, the company problem became bigger than my marriage. Much bigger. I asked. Did you know? No. Can you prove that? I don't know. That was the right answer. Not outrage. Not certainty. Evidence. She whispered. The board called an emergency meeting. When? Now. Then the last thing she said before hanging up. They're not investigating whether Adrian should be fired anymore. A pause. They're investigating whether I should still be CEO. By the time Sabrina entered Alvera's emergency board meeting, the question was no longer whether Adrian Cross had abused his access. He had. The question was whether Sabrina had created a company where one assistant could quietly reshape what the CEO saw, what lenders heard, and which risks reached the board. That was harder. Because you could fire Adrian. You could not fire the operating culture with one signature. At 1:15 p.m., Alvera's outside counsel, Rebecca Sloan, opened the meeting. I was not there. Stonegate was represented by Malcolm Price as an observer for financing matters only. That distinction mattered more every day. Sabrina later gave me the full sequence herself. The board started with Black Ridge. The resort's lift contractor had reported intermittent sensor faults on one of the main high-speed chairs. Not catastrophic failure. Not evidence the lift was unsafe to operate permanently. But repeated faults meant the maintenance team was supposed to escalate the issue and obtain a deeper diagnostic review. Instead, the resort performed temporary resets. The lift reopened. The fault returned. 3 times. The contractor's formal safety memo was sent to Black Ridge management. Then forwarded to Alvera operations. Then to Adrian. Why Adrian? Because Black Ridge was scheduled for a lender tour during the Borealis financing process. The resort president wrote, "Need CEO office visibility before we escalate. Lenders are on site next month." Adrian replied, "Do not circulate broadly until engineering confirms whether this is a true mechanical issue or a sensor nuisance. We don't need an unverified maintenance item becoming transaction noise." 26 days passed. Engineering eventually replaced the faulty component. No accident happened. No guest was injured. The lift remained within operational certification during the period. Those facts mattered. But so did the delay. A board member named Helen Cho asked the obvious question. Did the safety team know lender optics were influencing escalation? The answer was yes. Because Adrian had copied 2 operations executives and written, "Handle operationally first. No reason to elevate to Sabrina until we know this is material." Then came the question everyone expected. Did Sabrina authorize that? No evidence said she did. That helped her. For about 5 minutes. Then Rebecca opened a different email. 6 months earlier, Sabrina had written to Adrian after a separate resort issue. "Stop bringing me every preliminary concern before operations knows whether it's real. Filter noise. I need decisions, not alarms. Sabrina stared at the screen. I wrote that. Rebecca nodded. Context? A guest wing water system triggered false pressure readings at a resort in Montana. It became 3 hours of executive escalation over a sensor calibration issue. So you told Mr. Cross to filter noise? Yes. Did you define what he was authorized to filter? Sabrina paused. No. Did you exclude safety? No. Finance? No. Compliance? No. No formal boundaries? No. That was the problem. Not that Sabrina told him to hide a lift issue. She didn't. She told him to make problems disappear before they reached her. And then never defined which problems must never disappear. The board moved to the delayed maintenance reports. 3 properties had major deferred capital needs that had not been presented together at executive level. Individually, each delay had a plausible explanation. Roof replacement postponed until spring. Mechanical plant upgrade shifted into the next fiscal year. Employee housing repairs categorized as property-level rehabilitation. But Adrian had repeatedly encouraged executives to avoid creating one consolidated number before Borealis closed. One email read, "Sabrina does not need a $400 million headline when much of this is timing. Keep each property responsible for its own approved plan." Again, no proof Sabrina said that. Again, everyone accepted Adrian's statement because he sat beside her. A board member asked, "Why did nobody call Sabrina directly?" The CFO, Elise Warren, answered, "Because Adrian was treated as the CEO office." That sentence apparently changed the room. Not assistant. Not scheduler. The CEO office. Sabrina had made herself so difficult to access that the person controlling access became executive infrastructure. Another director asked Elise, "Did you ever challenge that?" "Yes." "How?" "I told Adrian several times that accounting classifications could not be changed for optics." "Did you tell Sabrina?" "Once." Everyone turned toward her. "When?" 8 months ago. Rebecca produced the email. Elise to Sabrina. "We need clarity on Adrian's role. Teams increasingly interpret his requests as CEO direction even where he lacks functional authority. This creates governance risk." Sabrina's response was one line. "Adrian speaks for me on coordination. Functional decisions stay with functional leaders. Don't overcomplicate this." I read that message later. It was probably the most damaging thing Sabrina had written. Not because it authorized fraud. It didn't. Not because it made her responsible for every decision Adrian made. It didn't. Because it showed someone had warned her. And she dismissed the warning. The board kept going. A human resources executive had raised a similar issue. A property president too. Even Alvera's general counsel had once recommended that Adrian's authority be formalized because external advisors were starting to treat him as part of executive management. Sabrina had resisted. Why? Because formalizing him would have required defining boundaries. Informal influence was easier. Faster. More flexible. Exactly what she liked. At 3:40, the board took a break. Sabrina called me from a private conference room. I answered. "They warned me." Her voice sounded empty. "About Adrian? About his role? How many times?" "At least 3. That was worse than I expected." "What did you do?" "I told them they were being bureaucratic." I closed my eyes. Why? Because things got done. There it was. That sentence explained almost everything. Things got done. The deal moved. The budget fit. The schedule cleared. The objection became manageable. The husband stopped complaining eventually. The investor always funded. The resort opened. The report stayed quiet until it could be contextualized. Everything got done. Until the cost of doing it that way arrived all at once. Sabrina whispered. "I thought good leadership meant removing friction. Sometimes friction is information. I know that now. That doesn't help the board much." "No." Then she said. "They asked whether I should step aside during the investigation." "Temporary leave?" "Yes." "What do you think?" "I don't want to." "I know. I built this company. I know. I don't think Adrian should get to take it from me." There it was again. I said nothing. She caught herself. "That's wrong." "Yes. This isn't about what he gets." "No. It's about whether they trust me." "Yes." She started crying. I let her. Then she asked. If you were on the board, what would you do? No. Gavin. No. I need an answer. You need to stop asking me to carry decisions that belong to other people. That's not fair. It is exactly fair. Silence. Then I softened. I can tell you what I'd ask. What? Whether you can lead the review while also being part of what needs review. She was quiet. That sounds like no. It sounds like a governance question. She laughed through tears. You really are impossible. Probably. Then I asked. Did the board say you knew about the safety delay? No. Did they say you ordered hidden capex? No. Did they say you falsified anything? No. Then don't confess to things you didn't do. I'm not. Good. But don't hide behind Adrian either. I know. That was the line she had to walk. Harder than anger. Harder than blame. Specific responsibility. At 4:15, the board reconvened. Sabrina returned voluntarily. Before anyone asked, she spoke. I want the record to distinguish between decisions I made and decisions Adrian made without my knowledge. Rebecca nodded. Of course. Sabrina continued. I did not instruct him to delay the Black Ridge safety report. Understood. I did not authorize hiding capital spending from lenders. Understood. I did not authorize him to represent Stonegate support as guaranteed. Understood. Then she stopped. And I did create the structure that let him believe he could manage information in my name. No one interrupted. I was warned that employees were treating him as executive authority. Another pause. I dismissed those concerns because I valued speed. Then. That was my decision. Malcolm told me later the room changed after that. Not because confession saved her. It didn't. But because the board no longer had to drag every admission out of her. She continued. I also made access to me too dependent on one person. I rewarded solutions more than escalation. I treated preliminary risk as noise too often. And I allowed a personal relationship with Adrian to make me less skeptical of his judgment than I should have been. That last sentence caught everyone's attention. The board chair, Daniel Whitcomb, asked. What personal relationship? Sabrina froze. Until that moment, the board knew Adrian was close to her. They knew he spent unusual amounts of time in her private orbit. They did not know everything. Daniel asked again. Are you saying your relationship with Mr. Cross exceeded normal professional boundaries? Sabrina looked down. Yes. The room went silent. Rebecca asked. Sexual? No. Romantic? Sabrina hesitated. Yes. That was the first time she admitted it formally. Not to me. To the board. She and Adrian had never slept together. At least, no evidence said they had. But over the previous 6 months they had exchanged messages that were clearly intimate. Not explicit. Worse in a different way. Late-night dependence. Private language. Future speculation. One message from Sabrina. Sometimes I think you're the only person who understands what it costs to keep all this moving. Adrian. Because I'm the only one who doesn't ask you to become smaller to make him comfortable. Sabrina. Don't start. Adrian. You know I'm right. Another. If things were different, I'd steal you away from all of this for a month. Sabrina. Maybe I'd let you. No physical affair proven. Emotional affair? I did not need a lawyer to define it for me. The board did. Because Sabrina had failed to disclose a personal relationship with someone exercising informal corporate influence. That created a conflict issue much bigger than bad judgment. Rebecca asked. Did you disclose this relationship to General Counsel? No. Human Resources? No. The board? No. Why? Sabrina answered quietly. Because I told myself it wasn't a relationship. That sentence sounded familiar. We had spent months doing exactly that at home. Adrian was just an assistant. Their closeness was just work. My concern was jealousy. His access was efficiency. The labels had changed. Reality had not. By 6:30, the board voted. 7-1. Sabrina would take an immediate paid administrative leave as CEO while an independent review examined executive access controls, disclosure obligations, financial reporting processes, and the extent of Adrian's unauthorized activity. She was not fired. Not yet. The COO, Marcus Bell, became interim CEO. Sabrina retained her board seat but could not participate in matters involving the investigation. The company announced it after markets closed. The statement was carefully written. Alvera Group today announced that Chief Executive Officer Sabrina Hale has voluntarily agreed to a temporary leave of absence while the board conducts an independent review of executive governance and internal information controls. The review follows previously disclosed concerns regarding unauthorized conduct by a former member of the CEO's office. Former member. Adrian's termination became effective the same day. For cause. Specifically, unauthorized representations to internal and external parties, failure to follow escalation procedures, misuse of delegated access, interference with risk reporting, and acting beyond the scope of his employment. No fraud charge. No criminal accusation. Enough to end his career at Alvera. At 7:12, Sabrina called me from the back seat of her car. They put me on leave. I saw. I agreed before the vote. That was smart. I hated it. I know. She was quiet. Then, I told them about Adrian. Yes. How did you know? Malcolm heard that part. I should have told them months ago. Yes. I should have told you too. Yes. We never slept together. I know. You believe me? Yes. That seemed to hurt her more. Why? Because the evidence does not show otherwise. That's all? What do you want from me? I don't know. There it was again. Then. I kept thinking because I didn't sleep with him, I could still call everything else harmless. I said nothing. He made me feel understood. I know. You challenged everything. Yes. I started resenting that. I know. I thought he supported me. He supported whatever kept him close to influence. She cried quietly. Then said, but I liked it. That mattered. I liked having someone who never made me feel wrong. I looked out the window. That is not support. I know. It's dependence. I know. Then she whispered, I want to come home. I closed my eyes. We still technically shared the house. I had been staying at a Stonegate-owned apartment since Jackson Hole. You can go to the house. I mean to you. That was different. No. She stopped crying. Completely. What? No. Gavin. I'm filing tomorrow. For divorce. Yes. You waited until I lost the CEO role. No. You're leaving while I'm suspended. I decided before the board meeting. You said you didn't know. I didn't know whether anything could be repaired. And now you do? Yes. Because of Adrian? No. Her breath shook. Then why? Because the snow was punishment. Silence. You were angry at me, so you used people who worked for you to humiliate me. I know. You stopped a guard from giving me his jacket. I know. You watched. A broken inhale. I know. And afterward, instead of asking whether I was okay, you assigned me another room and told me we'd discuss my behavior in the morning. She was crying again. I know. That wasn't Adrian. No. That was you. Yes. I let the word stay there. The board could investigate her management. Stonegate could review capital. Lawyers could classify Adrian's conduct. None of them needed to decide what I already knew. I could not stay married to someone who had used authority to punish me and expected love to erase the consequence. She whispered. I'm sorry. I believe you. Then why isn't that enough? Because believing an apology is not the same as trusting the person who gives it. She made no sound for several seconds. Then, will you try to destroy Alvera in the divorce? No. Stonegate? No retaliation. My shares? Your separate property stays yours. Marital property gets handled legally. She started crying harder. You're really leaving? Yes. Not threatening. Not negotiating. Not asking her to choose between me and Adrian. Leaving. The next morning, my divorce attorney filed in Mecklenburg County. No press release. No public accusations. No emergency claim against her company. Just a petition. That afternoon, Alvera's independent review team found the first document that put Sabrina's CEO position in real danger. It was not from Adrian. It was from her. 9 months earlier, General Counsel had sent her a formal recommendation. Given Mr. Cross's expanding access to strategic, financial, and operational matters, legal recommends either limiting his role to executive assistant functions or reclassifying the position with defined authority, conflict disclosure, and board oversight. Sabrina replied. No reclassification. Formal layers, slow execution. I trust Adrian to know where the line is. The line. She had known there was one. She just trusted him to draw it himself. And when the board saw that email, the investigation stopped being about whether Adrian had secretly taken too much power. It became about why the CEO had been warned that he already had too much, and chose speed over control anyway. The email did not prove Sabrina had ordered Adrian to hide a safety report. It did something more damaging. It proved she had been warned that his authority was becoming dangerous, and had chosen not to fix it. By the second week of Alvera's independent review, outside counsel had organized the evidence into 3 categories: what Adrian had done without Sabrina's knowledge, what Sabrina had expressly approved, and what she had been warned about but allowed to continue. The first category was Adrian's. He had delayed the Black Ridge safety report for 26 days. He had pushed property teams to postpone consolidated capital spending disclosures. He had described Stonegate financing as effectively guaranteed. He had inserted himself into lender communications he was not authorized to control. He had filtered internal concerns based partly on whether they might complicate Borealis financing. Those findings ended any chance of him returning to Alvera. The second category belonged to Sabrina. She had authorized Adrian to filter noise. She had instructed executives to treat him as speaking for her on coordination. She had allowed him into financing, operations, investor relations, and strategy discussions far beyond the normal scope of an executive assistant. She had maintained an undisclosed emotional relationship with him while he exercised that influence. The third category was the one that threatened her career. Because warnings existed. Not one. Several. General counsel had warned her. The CFO had warned her. Human resources had warned her. A resort president had warned her. Each warning used different words. Unclear authority. Governance risk. Role confusion. CEO office overreach. External parties assuming Adrian spoke with executive authority. Sabrina dismissed every one. Not because she wanted fraud. Not because she wanted unsafe lifts. Because Adrian made her life easier. That was the finding she could not explain away. The board hearing took almost 9 hours. Malcolm attended the financing portion for Stonegate. I stayed away. This was not my verdict to deliver. Daniel Whitcomb, Alvera's board chair, asked Sabrina one question that apparently changed the tone of the entire meeting. If 4 senior leaders told you that Mr. Cross's influence was creating risk, why did you continue expanding his access? Sabrina sat silently for several seconds. Then answered. Because he solved problems. Daniel waited. She continued. When people brought me risks, Adrian usually brought me away around them. Around the risk? Sometimes. Around the person raising it? Sabrina looked down. Yes. That answer mattered. Daniel asked. Did you begin treating resistance as evidence someone lacked commitment? Yes. Mr. Hale? A pause. Yes. Your CFO? Sometimes. Legal? Yes. Property leadership? Yes. And Mr. Cross rarely resisted you? No. Did that make you trust him more? Yes. The room went quiet. Then Daniel said. That is not a controls failure, Sabrina. She looked up. What is it? A leadership failure. There it was. No Adrian to hide behind. No marital explanation. No bad spreadsheet. Leadership. The review concluded 3 days later. Alvera released 32 pages internally and a 6-page public summary. The findings were specific. The company did not conclude Sabrina had knowingly concealed the Black Ridge lift issue. It did not conclude she had falsified financial statements. It did not accuse her of fraud. It did not claim she personally instructed anyone to deceive lenders. But it did conclude that Sabrina failed to define and supervise Adrian's expanded authority, ignored repeated warnings about role confusion, allowed a personal relationship to compromise oversight, tolerated informal information filtering around material operational and financing matters, encouraged a management culture where inconvenient risks were delayed until fully developed, relied improperly on assumed Stonegate support in strategic planning, and damaged board confidence in her ability to enforce the controls required of a public company CEO. The board voted 6-2. Sabrina would not return as chief executive. She was offered 2 options. Resign as CEO and remain on the board during a 6-month transition, or face a formal removal vote. She resigned. There was no security escort. No dramatic scene. No box of belongings dumped on a sidewalk. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Sabrina walked into the same headquarters she had built and told the senior leadership team herself. I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately. Someone asked whether Adrian had caused it. Sabrina shook her head. No. Then she said something I never expected to hear from her. Adrian is responsible for what he did. A pause. I am responsible for making it possible for him to matter as much as he did. That sentence probably saved what remained of her reputation. Marcus Bell, the interim CEO, became permanent CEO after a 60-day search. The market rose 3% on the announcement. That hurt Sabrina. She admitted it later. Not because she wanted Alvera to fail. Because part of her had still believed the company could not function without her. It could. That was another form of control she had mistaken for identity. The Borealis acquisition died formally 2 weeks later. Not because Stonegate refused to return. Alvera's new board-led financing committee concluded the deal would leave leverage too high even with revised terms. Borealis wanted a higher equity commitment. Alvera refused. The parties terminated the agreement under the financing out provisions. Alvera paid a contractual $38 million termination fee. Painful. Not fatal. Then the harder restructuring began. Without Borealis, Alvera still had 27 hotels, 9 ski resorts, 6 private clubs, and too much debt. Marcus ordered a portfolio review. 3 underperforming hotels went up for sale. 1 private club expansion was cancelled. 2 resort redevelopment projects were pushed back 18 months. Executive bonuses were reduced. A planned branded residence launch in Nashville was shelved. Then came the asset Sabrina hated losing most. The Charleston Hotel. The first one. The building where Alvera started. It remained profitable, but it no longer fit the company's capital strategy. A historic hotel operator offered $146 million. Marcus recommended selling. The board agreed. Sabrina voted no. She was still a director. 1 vote. That was all. When the motion passed 7-2, she called me. They're selling Charleston. I heard. That hotel is Alvera. No. It was Alvera's beginning. Same thing. No. She went quiet. Then. That's exactly what Marcus said. He's right. I hate both of you. I can live with that. She laughed once. Then started crying. I slept on the floor there. I remember. You brought me takeout because we didn't have a functioning kitchen. I remember. The boiler broke 3 days before opening. I remember that too. We built that place. Yes. She stopped. We. Not she. That was rare now. Then Sabrina whispered. Did I destroy everything? No. Feels like it. You lost the CEO job. Yes. The company still exists. Yes. Most employees still have jobs. Yes. The hotels still operate. Yes. You made serious mistakes. That is not the same as erasing 15 years. She cried quietly. You're being kinder than I deserve. That is not how I'm deciding what to say. Then why? Because truth doesn't become less true because I'm divorcing you. That silence lasted a long time. Our divorce moved more slowly than her CEO removal. That was normal. Companies could vote. Marriages required disclosure, valuations, negotiations, and court procedure. Sabrina's Alvera shares were complicated. Some predated our marriage. Some had vested during it. Some were subject to restrictions. Stonegate's assets were largely separate through family structures and agreements that existed years before Sabrina. Neither side tried to pretend otherwise. My attorney, Claire Monroe, told me, if you want revenge through the property settlement, find another lawyer. I don't. Good. Sabrina did not fight for Stonegate. I did not demand control of her founder's shares. We negotiated the marital portion of vested equity, real estate, joint accounts, and retirement assets. Then came the Jackson Hole incident. My lawyer asked whether I wanted to use it to support a fault-based claim. North Carolina law gave us several possible approaches, but fault would mainly matter in limited financial contexts. I said no. Why? Because I don't need a judge to punish her for it. Claire studied me. You have security footage. I know. Medical record? Yes. Witnesses? Yes. You understand how ugly that would look? Yes. And you don't want to use it? Only if she lies about what happened. She nodded. That was the line. Evidence for protection. Not entertainment. Sabrina did not lie. In settlement disclosures, she admitted she ordered security to remove me from the suite while I wore only a towel. She admitted she refused the guard's jacket because she believed I should be taken directly to the spa. She admitted she knew it was snowing. She denied intending to expose me to serious physical harm. I believed that too. She wanted humiliation. Not hypothermia. That did not make it acceptable. But accuracy mattered. The security footage became relevant for another reason. Travis Cole, the guard who gave me his jacket, had filed an internal incident report the same night. I had never seen it. Alvera's legal team produced it during the broader review. One line stood out. Mr. Cross appeared amused while Mr. Hale was being escorted from the executive suite and did not correct Ms. Hale's statement that the coffee spill was intentional, despite being positioned close enough to observe the accidental contact preceding the spill. Another witness agreed. A Borealis executive had been walking past the suite when the coffee incident began. He heard Adrian say, "I know you're angry." But he had also seen Adrian move into my path before the cup tipped. Not enough to prove Adrian caused it deliberately. Enough to destroy his claim that he knew I assaulted him. There was more. 2 days before the retreat, Adrian had texted a friend. "Gavin's finally coming to Jackson. Should be fun watching Sabrina realize how exhausting he is when she has real work to do." Another. "He hates that I'm closer to the deal than he is." The friend replied. "Careful. He's still the money. Adrian. For now." I read those words in Claire's office. For now. Adrian had not just believed Stonegate's support was permanent. He believed eventually it would no longer matter. That fit everything else. The informal authority. The financing assumptions. The emotional dependence. The belief that I was an obstacle Sabrina would eventually outgrow. But the investigation found no master plan. No secret attempt to steal Alvera. No forged documents. No criminal scheme. Just ambition mixed with access and a CEO who liked being told yes. Sometimes empires are damaged by conspiracies. More often they are damaged by ordinary weaknesses nobody wants to confront early. Alvera's debt fell after the first hotel sales. Liquidity improved. Lenders relaxed. The stock recovered about half its earlier decline. Stonegate's existing preferred investment remained in place. We did not dump it. Selling into panic would have hurt both Alvera and ourselves. Malcolm recommended holding. The investment committee agreed. Sabrina heard and called me. "You could have sold." "Yes. You didn't." "No." "Why?" "Because Stonegate's job is to make money, not send messages." Another quiet pause. "I really believed you wanted to destroy the company." "I know. Maybe because that's what I would have expected myself to do." That answer told me more than she intended. She had spent years viewing power as something people used when hurt. That was exactly what happened in Jackson Hole. She was angry. She had authority. So she used it. Now she was learning that having power and exercising it were separate choices. 3 months after resigning as CEO, Sabrina sold half her personal Alvera shares through an orderly secondary transaction. Not because she was broke. Because most of her net worth was trapped in the same company she no longer controlled. She diversified. The sale reduced her voting influence from 18% to just under 10%. For the first time since founding Alvera, she could not block certain major shareholder actions even with allies. When the transaction closed, financial press called it the end of Sabrina Hale's Alvera empire. She sent me the headline. "Apparently I'm dead." I replied. "Congratulations on discovering journalists." She answered. "I deserve that." Then, after a minute, "I'm sorry about the snow again." I stared at the message. She apologized almost every time we spoke now. Not because she thought repetition would win me back. I had already made clear it would not. Because she was finally understanding that what she did had not been one dramatic mistake. It was the purest expression of the person she had become. Angry. Certain. Powerful. Unwilling to hear no. And willing to make someone she loved suffer for challenging her in front of the man who always agreed with her. The following week, our divorce mediator scheduled the final settlement conference. Then Claire called me with something unexpected. "Sabrina wants to add a personal clause." "What kind?" "It has no legal effect." "Then why is it in a settlement?" She wants a written acknowledgement. Of what? Claire read the proposed language. Sabrina Hale acknowledges that the Jackson Hole removal was punitive, disproportionate, and personally motivated. Gavin Hale did not intentionally assault Adrian Cross, and Sabrina regrets using corporate security authority in a marital conflict. I sat silently. Claire asked, "You want it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I already know what happened. She may need it. Then she can write it to herself." Claire laughed softly. "I'll tell her no clause." "Good." The settlement did not need a confession. The marriage did not end because I lacked one. It ended because she finally understood what she had done. And I finally understood that understanding it did not require me to stay. Our final divorce settlement took 9 hours. Not because Sabrina wanted Stonegate. She had stopped asking for anything connected to my family's investment company weeks earlier. Not because I wanted Elvira. I didn't. The problem was simpler. 12 years of marriage creates a lot of things that belong partly to both people even when their businesses do not. 3 homes. Joint brokerage accounts. Art. Deferred compensation. Restricted stock that vested during the marriage. A private plane membership. 2 charitable foundations. And 1 lake house outside Charlotte that neither of us wanted to admit had become emotionally radioactive. We sat on opposite sides of a conference table. My attorney, Claire Monroe, beside me. Sabrina's attorney, Rebecca Finley, beside her. No screaming. No threats. Just numbers. By lunch, we had agreed on almost everything. Sabrina kept her remaining founder shares in Elvira. I received an offsetting portion of liquid marital assets rather than taking stock in her company. That was deliberate. I did not want to become her shareholder through divorce. Stonegate already had enough exposure. She kept the Manhattan apartment. I kept the ranch property in Montana. The Charlotte house would be sold. The lake house became the problem. Sabrina stared at the valuation report. "You should keep it." "I don't want it." "You love that house." "I loved that house with you." Her face changed. Claire looked down at her notes. Rebecca did the same. "Some sentences do not belong to lawyers." Sabrina whispered. "So sell it." "We agree." That should have ended the issue. Instead, she said, "Can I ask you something?" Claire shifted slightly. I nodded. "Did you decide to leave me that night? In Jackson Hole?" "Yes." "I thought about it." "No." Sabrina looked surprised. "When?" "The next morning. After Stonegate froze Borealis? Before the committee vote." "What changed overnight?" I could have said the cold. The humiliation. Adrian. The coffee. But none of those were the complete answer. I woke up and realized I was planning how to explain your behavior to myself. She went still. "I had done it for years." "What do you mean?" "When you missed dinners because of work, I told myself you were building something." "You were." "When you canceled vacations, I told myself employees depended on you." "They did." "When Adrian started showing up everywhere, I told myself I was jealous." Her eyes lowered. "When you treated Stonegate Capital like it was part of Elvira's balance sheet, I told myself marriage meant we were aligned." A long silence. "And when you left me in the snow, I was already trying to explain why you didn't really mean it." Sabrina's eyes filled. "That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That if I stayed, would spend the rest of my life translating things you did into versions I could forgive." She cried quietly. I continued. "I didn't want to live like that anymore." Sabrina nodded. No argument. No promise to change. That was different. Then she signed. So did I. The settlement went to the court for approval. 6 weeks later, the marriage legally ended. No crowd outside. No reporters in the courtroom. No final confrontation. The judge asked whether both parties understood the agreement. "Yes," Sabrina said. "Yes," I said. The decree was entered. 12 years became past tense. Outside the courthouse, Sabrina stood near the steps while Claire walked ahead to take a call. Snow had started falling. Lightly. Nothing like Wyoming. Sabrina looked up at it. I knew exactly what she was thinking. "So this is cruel," she said. "What?" "The weather." I almost smiled. "It's December." "I know." She wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Then, without looking at me, she said, "I keep thinking about Travis." "The security guard?" "Yes." "What about him?" "He tried to give you his jacket." "Yes." And I stopped him. Yes. Her voice broke. I've replayed that more than anything else. I understood why. Ordering me out could be explained as anger. Believing the spill was intentional could be explained as bad judgment. But stopping the jacket? There was no operational reason. No misunderstanding. She wanted punishment to remain punishment. That was the moment you wanted me to suffer, I said. She closed her eyes. Yes. There it was. No defense. I'm sorry. I know. She looked at me. Do you forgive me? I thought carefully. Yes. Her face changed immediately. Hope. I stopped it before it grew. That doesn't mean I want you back. The hope disappeared. I know. Forgiveness isn't restoration. I know. Some things can be forgiven and still stay over. She nodded slowly. I'm learning that. Then she walked to her car. I walked to mine. That was the last day Sabrina Hale was my wife. It was not the last day Alvera belonged to her. That came later. The company's restructuring accelerated after the Charleston sale. Marcus Bell was far less sentimental than Sabrina. He reviewed every property as though its history did not matter. Because to a balance sheet, it didn't. 2 hotels in California were sold. A private club in Arizona went into a joint venture with an outside operator. The Nashville residences were canceled permanently. Black Ridge received a $74 million maintenance and modernization budget, including a complete lift control upgrade and an independent safety reporting system. Capital expenditure went up before it went down. That upset analysts initially. Then guest satisfaction improved. Insurance pricing improved. Employee retention improved. Debt fell. Alvera became smaller. And healthier. The company Sabrina built around constant expansion became a company focused on returns. She hated that description. You make it sound boring, she told me once. Profitable can be boring. I never wanted boring. I know. That was probably part of the problem. Yes. She laughed. You could pretend to disagree once in a while. No. By then, our conversations had become occasional. Mostly practical. A charity board we still both supported. Tax documentation. One property sale. Nothing personal unless Sabrina pushed it there. Then, 8 months after the divorce, Alvera's annual shareholder meeting arrived. Sabrina still held just under 10% of the company. She also remained a director. That position mattered to her more than I realized. Not because she needed income. Because the boardroom was the last place where she was still officially part of Alvera's command structure. Stonegate controlled roughly 12% of voting power through our existing preferred and converted holdings. Smaller than before. Still significant. 2 weeks before the meeting, Daniel Whitcomb called Malcolm. The board planned to recommend that Sabrina not be renominated as director. Malcolm called me. Did you know? No. Her term expires this year. I know. They want a fully independent board. That makes sense. You understand what press will say. Yes. Founder pushed out of her own empire. I could already see it. Stonegate's vote? Malcolm asked. What does governance recommend? Support the slate. Then support the slate. You don't want to recuse yourself? I thought about it. No. Why not? The divorce is final. We're evaluating board independence. You're sure? Yes. Then I added. But document the rationale. He laughed. Always. Sabrina learned 3 days later. She called me immediately. Did you know? Malcolm told me. You're voting me out. Stonegate is supporting the independent slate. That is a very polished way to say yes. It's accurate. I founded Alvera. Yes. I own more shares than half the board combined. That does not guarantee a board seat. It did for 15 years. Things changed. Because of me. Partly. Because of Adrian. Partly. Because of you? No. She went silent. You could vote for me. Yes. Will you? No. Her breath caught. Why? Because I think an independent board is better for the company. That simple? Yes. You don't want me punished? No. You don't want revenge? No. Then why does every door keep closing after you leave? That sentence stayed with me. I answered carefully. Because some of those doors were being held open by things you mistook for permanent. Stonegate support. My marriage. Her CEO authority. Board loyalty. Founder influence. Adrian's usefulness. All temporary. All treated as infrastructure. Sabrina said nothing. Then. If shareholders vote me out, that's it. As a director. As Alvera. No. What do you mean? You still own shares. That's not the same. No. You really don't understand. I think I do. Then say it. I leaned back. You don't mean losing Alvera. Her breathing slowed. You mean losing the right to tell Alvera what to do. Silence. Then. Yes. That was honest. The annual meeting lasted less than 2 hours. Marcus presented improved operating margins. Debt had declined by almost $600 million. Black Ridge's safety program became the template for every mountain property. The company had restored investment-grade outlook at one major rating agency. No empire collapsing. No employees fleeing a burning headquarters. Just a company learning how to function after its founder stopped being the center. Then came board elections. The independent slate passed with 71% support. Sabrina received enough write-in and withheld vote support to prove many shareholders still respected her. Not enough to remain. Her board term ended at 12:17 p.m. No security guard removed her. Nobody took her phone. She simply stopped being a director when the meeting adjourned. I was there. Not beside her. 3 rows back with Stonegate. Afterward, Sabrina remained seated while shareholders left. I almost walked away. Then she called my name. Gavin. I stopped. She looked toward the stage. That used to be my seat. Yes. I thought this would feel like they stole something. And? It doesn't. What does it feel like? She considered the question. Like they kept going. That was probably worse. Empires train their founders to believe the center cannot move. Then one day the center moves. The building remains standing. Employees still arrive. Guests still check in. Payroll still runs. Board meetings still happen. No one waits for permission from the person whose name used to define everything. Sabrina looked toward me. Did I build something stronger than me? Yes. A tear rolled down her cheek. That should make me happy. Eventually. She smiled faintly. You always did hate my timelines. Yes. Then her phone vibrated. She looked down. For half a second, her expression changed. Who is it? She hesitated. Adrian. That surprised me. I thought you blocked him. I did. New number? Yes. What does he want? She turned the screen toward me. One message. You let Gavin take everything from you. I warned you this would happen. I read it once. Then handed the phone back. Sabrina stared at the words. A year earlier, that message might have worked. It gave her someone to blame. Me. The board. Stonegate. Anyone except herself. Instead, she typed something. I did not ask what. She showed me before sending. Gavin did not make me ignore legal. He did not give you authority. He did not order security to put him in the snow. He did not make me confuse loyalty with obedience. Stop using him to explain decisions I made. Then. Do not contact me again. She sent it. Blocked the number. And placed the phone face down. I looked at her. That was overdue. I know. Then she gave me the first real smile I had seen from her in months. I'm getting better at hearing no. Apparently. She stood. For the first time since I met her, Sabrina Hale left an Alvera shareholder meeting without anyone following behind her. No assistant. No security detail. No executives waiting for instructions. Just Sabrina. The company still carried billions in assets. Its hotels still operated. Its resorts still filled every winter. But the empire she had built, the one where her authority moved through every room, where Stonegate Capital appeared whenever she needed it, where one assistant could speak in her name, where her husband absorbed the consequences. That empire was gone. Alvera survived. Sabrina's empire did not. And I was beginning to understand that destroying it had required far less than taking everything away. I had only stopped giving her what had never actually belonged to her. The security footage from Jackson Hole leaked 11 months after our divorce. Not the entire incident. 23 seconds. That was enough. The video began with the exterior doors opening. Then me stepping into the snow wearing nothing but a white hotel towel. Barefoot. Shoulders already hunched against the cold. Travis Cole walking beside me. Snow blowing sideways across the courtyard. Then the moment everyone replayed. Travis removing his security jacket. Trying to put it around me. A woman's voice coming through his radio. Sabrina's. No. He can get a robe at the spa. Then me crossing the courtyard. The locked spa doors. The wind catching my towel. Travis wrapping his jacket around me anyway. The clip ended. By 9 in the morning, it had 8 million views. By lunch, every business network in the country had it. The headlines wrote themselves. Former Alvera CEO ordered husband into snow nearly naked. The 23-second video behind a billion-dollar divorce. Sabrina hails Jackson Hole meltdown caught on camera. I hated all of them. Not because they were entirely false. Because they turned the ugliest night of my marriage into entertainment. Claire Monroe called me at 8:17. Do you know who leaked it? No. Alvera is investigating. I'm sure. Media wants comment. No. Good. Why does that sound surprising? Because you now have the easiest revenge opportunity of your life. I looked at the video frozen on my laptop. My own face was barely visible. My body was shaking. I closed the screen. I already got divorced. That has never stopped anybody from enjoying a second round. I'm not interested. She paused. Sabrina's lawyer called. What does she want? Nothing from you. That surprised me. She's issuing a statement. What kind? She sent us a copy first because it references you. Claire read it. The video released today depicts an incident for which I am solely responsible. Gavin Hale did not intentionally spill coffee on my former employee, and I had no reasonable basis to punish him as I did. I was angry, humiliated, and wrong. I used authority available to me as CEO of the property owner to turn a marital conflict into public punishment. I regret it deeply. Claire stopped. There's more. Read it. Mr. Hale did not cause my later resignation from Alvera. He did not remove me from the board. He did not cause the company's operational review. Stonegate's decisions were made through its own governance processes. My professional consequences followed from decisions I made before and after Jackson Hole. I said nothing. Claire continued. I ask that media and the public not harass current Alvera employees, Mr. Hale, Travis Cole, or anyone else visible in the footage. That was it. No excuse. No Adrian. No claim the footage lacked context. No complaint about privacy. What do you think? Claire asked. Accurate. That's all? What else should I think? She laughed softly. You two may have had the most expensive path to basic emotional maturity I've ever seen. Send me your invoice. Already did. I hung up. Stonegate released no statement. Alvera issued one sentence confirming that the incident had been reviewed during its previous governance investigation and that Sabrina no longer held any management or board position. The company had no reason to relitigate it. The internet did anyway. Old pictures appeared. Sabrina and Adrian boarding private jets. Sabrina at Black Ridge. Me beside her at Alvera openings. Anonymous accounts claimed Adrian had been her lover for years. No evidence supported that. Others claimed I had deliberately engineered Alvera's funding crisis after the snow. That was wrong too. One commentator said I withdrew $1.1 billion the next morning with a single phone call. I almost admired the efficiency. The truth had involved an investment committee, financial models, conditional documents, 4 votes, revised leverage analysis, lender reviews, and weeks of restructuring. Reality rarely goes viral. A billionaire revenge fantasy does. At noon, Malcolm walked into my office holding his phone. You're a folk hero. That sounds terrible. People are calling you the snow billionaire. That is worse. He sat down. Stonegate's getting inbound messages. From? Mostly idiots asking whether we'll fund their businesses because their wives were mean to them. I stared at him. You're joking. No. Delete everything. Already done. Then he became serious. One real issue. What? The leak may have come from an old Alvera litigation repository. Meaning? Someone with authorized access downloaded the incident footage 6 months ago. Who? They're checking. I immediately thought of Adrian. So did Malcolm. Neither of us said it. Not yet. Alvera's cybersecurity team found the answer 2 days later. Not Adrian. A former outside contractor who had worked on the internal review. He had retained a copy improperly after his engagement ended. A media broker paid him $18,000. Alvera sued him for breach of confidentiality. That was the end of the mystery. Almost disappointing. People wanted villains with grand plans. Sometimes the person who leaks a life-changing video is just a contractor who wants $18,000. Sabrina called me that evening. First time in 3 months. Are you okay? The question almost made me laugh. You're asking me? Yes. I'm fine. I didn't know the footage still existed outside Alvera. I assumed it did. I'm sorry. I know. She was quiet. Then, Travis called me. That surprised me. Why? To tell me he wasn't angry. At you? Yes. What did you say? That he should have been. What did he say? That night was why he stopped working executive security. I leaned back. I had not known that. He left Alvera. 6 months later. Why? He said he realized he never wanted to be in a job where someone's title could make him doubt basic judgment. That hit harder than I expected. Sabrina continued. He works for County Emergency Management now. Good. I offered to pay for some training he wanted. What did he say? No. I smiled. How'd you handle that? A pause. Better than I used to. That was almost funny. Then Sabrina said. I'm teaching a class next month. You? Yes. On what? Founder governance. I laughed. She did too. I know. That is aggressive. The institute asked me. What institute? A private director education program in Chicago. What are you teaching them? How not to let trusted staff become invisible power centers. That sounds useful. And how founders confuse company loyalty with personal loyalty. Also useful. Anne. She hesitated. What? How executive authority can contaminate personal relationships. I knew where that came from. The snow. Yes. I looked at the dark window of my office. You're using it? Not the video. Good. I'm describing the decision. That mattered. What are you going to say? She was quiet for several seconds. Then, that I was angry at my husband. And, that I had authority over the property staff. And, that instead of keeping those two facts separate, I used the second to express the first. That was clean. No excuses. Then she said. I used to think abuse of power meant stealing money or threatening employees. It can. I didn't understand it could be much smaller. Smaller? You know what I mean. I did. A radio order. A security instruction. A refusal to allow a jacket. Tiny decisions made powerful by the position behind them. I'm not comparing myself to something worse, she said. I mean the mechanism. I understand. She sounded relieved. Then, would you mind? What? If I teach it? I thought about that. The incident belonged to both of us. But her conduct belonged to her. If you don't use my name or the footage, no. Thank you. You don't need permission to talk about your own mistake. I know. Then why ask? Because your humiliation was part of it. That answer was good enough. Teach it. She did. A month later, someone sent Malcolm a clip from the seminar. Not the Jackson Hole footage. A recording of Sabrina standing in front of maybe 80 executives. No designer CEO suit. No entourage. Just a black blazer and a presentation remote. Behind her was a slide. Power does not stay at work just because you go home. Sabrina said. I once used corporate security to punish my husband during a private conflict. The room became still. I was angry. I believed he had intentionally embarrassed one of my employees. I was wrong about that. Then. But even if I had been right about the insult, I was still wrong about the authority. She clicked to the next slide. Right to be angry is not equal to right to use power. I had forgotten that the people around me were trained to execute my instructions. That meant my emotional impulses could become institutional actions faster than an ordinary person's could. She paused. That is one of the most dangerous privileges of leadership. I watched the clip twice. Not because I missed her. Because she had finally found the sentence I wished she understood that night. My anger had once been dangerous too. Stonegate controlled enough money to make my emotions matter. That was why I kept recusing myself. Why the committee voted. Why Malcolm presented the analysis. Why I refused to tell them what answer I wanted. I had not done that because I was morally superior. I did it because I had watched Sabrina demonstrate what happens when personal injury and institutional power share the same hand. That lesson belonged to me too. Stonegate eventually completed its full exit from Alvera 3 years after the divorce. Not abruptly. Not at a discount. We sold the remaining position in stages to institutional investors. The final sale generated an excellent return. Malcolm placed the closing statement on my desk. That's it. I looked at the number. Our family had invested in Alvera for more than a decade. Helped finance hotels, resorts, expansion, mistakes, successes. Now, zero equity, zero preferred exposure, zero board observer rights. No capital relationship between Stonegate and Alvera. How does it feel? Malcolm asked. Clean. Not sad? A little. He nodded. Same. That evening, I received a message from Sabrina. Heard Stonegate sold the last position. Yes. A minute later. Thank your family for believing in Alvera when almost nobody did. I stared at that. Not me. Not her. Alvera. The company. Separate at last. I replied. You gave them a good return. She sent. Eventually. Then. I used to think your money proved you loved me. I waited. Another message arrived. Then when you took it back, I thought it proved you hated me. And finally. Both were wrong. I typed. Yes. Nothing else needed saying. Sabrina had not become poor. Her remaining investments, property, and diversified Alvera proceeds still left her extraordinarily wealthy. She had not lost her ability. She later joined 2 private company boards and advised hotel founders. She never returned to operating a public hospitality empire. Adrian disappeared from her life entirely. His career recovered partially, but never near the influence he once had. Alvera survived him. It survived Sabrina. It survived Stonegate leaving. That was the final proof that an empire was never supposed to be one person. And for the first time, I could look at what happened without needing Sabrina ruin to make my leaving feel justified. She lost the CEO chair, the board seat, control of the company she founded, her assistant, her marriage, the version of herself who believed authority could make every no temporary. Those were consequences. But her life kept going. So did mine. The last time I saw the leaked Jackson Hole video, it played silently on a television in an airport lounge. A business channel was running a retrospective on founder scandals. There I was again. Barefoot. Towel. Snow. Travis's jacket. The caption read, "The moment that destroyed Sabrina Hale's empire." I watched for 3 seconds. Then turned away. Because they still had it wrong. That moment did not destroy her empire. It revealed the kind of empire she had built. Everything afterward was simply what happened when the people, money, and institutions around her stopped pretending that her authority had no limits. 5 years after Jackson Hole, I returned to Black Ridge for the first time. Not for Sabrina. Not for Alvera. Stonegate no longer owned a dollar of the company. I was there because the Western Hospitality Risk Council had invited me to speak on capital governance. The irony was obvious. A man who had once walked barefoot through snow outside an Alvera resort was now being paid to explain why investors should never let personal relationships substitute for written controls. I accepted anyway. Black Ridge looked different. The old lift control systems were gone. The employee housing complex had been rebuilt. The main lodge had been renovated. Alvera had placed QR codes near every guest services desk that linked directly to anonymous safety reporting. The company had become almost aggressive about escalation. One poster in the staff corridor read, "If it feels like noise, report it anyway." I stopped when I saw that. 5 years earlier, Sabrina had told Adrian to filter noise. Now Alvera trained 20-year-old lift operators not to. That was how institutions learned. Slowly. Expensively. Usually after someone proved why the old way was dangerous. My presentation was scheduled for the second afternoon. The audience included hotel executives, lenders, private equity partners, and resort operators. I spoke for 40 minutes. No mention of the snow. No mention of my marriage. I talked about conditional capital, founder dependency, related party assumptions, delegated authority, the difference between ownership and influence. Then someone in the audience asked the question I knew would come eventually. A young CFO from a resort company in Utah raised her hand. Is it ever reasonable for a lender or investor to rely on relationship history instead of written commitments? Reasonable to consider it? Yes. Reasonable to underwrite against it? No. She smiled. Never? Never if losing that relationship creates material failure. Even family? Especially family. A few people laughed. I didn't. Family relationships are emotional, I said. Capital commitments are structural. If your deal only works because someone loves you, you do not have a financing structure. You have a hope. The room went quiet. That was the lesson. Not that spouses should distrust each other. Not that every handshake needs lawyers. That a billion-dollar company should survive a marriage changing. Alvera eventually did. That evening, I walked past the same courtyard where security had once escorted me into the snow. The spa building had been rebuilt. Glass walls. Heated stone walkway. Covered access from the hotel. I stood there longer than I expected. A memory can lose its power without disappearing. I still remembered the cold. The humiliation. Travis's jacket. Sabrina watching from above. But I no longer felt the need to prove anything about it. Someone behind me said. They finally covered the walkway. I turned. Sabrina. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked older. So did I. Her hair was shorter. No executive entourage. No assistant. She wore a long gray coat and carried her own laptop bag. What are you doing here? Speaking tomorrow. On? Founder governance. I laughed. Of course. She smiled. The universe has no subtlety. We stood beside the glass wall. Then she looked toward the courtyard. I haven't been back since that weekend. That surprised me. Seriously? Yes. Why now? Same reason as you, probably. Professional invitation? And because eventually avoiding a play starts giving it too much authority. That sounded like something she taught now. I nodded. For a while we just watched snow fall. Not a storm. Small flakes. Quiet. Then Sabrina said. I owe Travis a better thank you. You already spoke to him. I know. He's doing fine. I know that too. You check. Once a year. I looked at her. He probably loves that. I don't contact him. I look at the county emergency management website. That is somehow worse. She laughed. Then became serious. I still think about the jacket. I know. I think that may be the worst decision I ever made. Worse than Adrian? Yes. Worse than losing the CEO role? Yes. Why? Because there was no ambiguity. That answer made sense. She continued. I can explain how Adrian's role became unclear. Yes. I can explain how funding assumptions developed over years. Yes. I can explain how the safety report got delayed through a bad escalation culture. Yes. But the jacket? She shook her head. I wanted you cold. Simple. Ugly. True. I wanted you to feel punished. Yes. I knew exactly what I was doing for those few seconds. I said nothing. Then she looked at me. I think that's why I stopped asking you to forgive me. You did ask. Years ago. Yes. You said you did. I meant it. I know. But forgiveness doesn't rewrite the event. She nodded. That took me a long time to understand. We walked toward the lodge. Inside, the lobby was crowded with conference attendees. Nobody paid us much attention. That felt strange. Once, any room containing Sabrina Hale seemed to rearrange itself around her. Now she was simply another former executive carrying a conference badge. Her badge read, Sabrina Hale. Founder Governance Advisor. Not CEO. Not Director. Not Alvera. Just her name. She noticed me looking. Better? Accurate. I used to think titles made people listen. They do. They shouldn't make them obey blindly. No. She smiled. I'm stealing that. Invoice is coming. We sat near the fireplace. The same kind of oversized stone fireplace Alvera used in nearly every mountain property. Maybe not the same one from Jackson Hole. Still close enough to make memory uncomfortable. Sabrina ordered tea. I ordered coffee. When the coffee arrived, we both looked at the cup. Then at each other. She started laughing first. So did I. It was the first time the story felt absurd instead of painful. Careful, she said. I've learned. Apparently I have too. Then she asked. Do you ever think about the title people gave the whole thing? What title? That you destroyed my empire. I smiled. Sometimes. Did you? No. She tilted her head. You definitely helped. I withdrew one conditional commitment. Which was enormous. Yes. You supported the board independent slate. Yes. Stonegate eventually sold everything. Yes. You divorced me. Yes. That sounds fairly destructive. It sounds like I stopped supporting things I was no longer willing to support. She considered that. Same outcome. No. What's the difference? Destruction requires making something worse on purpose. And withdrawal? Withdrawal means you stop preventing consequences. She stared at me. Then nodded slowly. That's better. It's also less dramatic. Nobody clicks that headline. Exactly. She stirred her tea. Do you know what actually destroyed my empire? What? My belief that everything around me existed because I controlled it. That was good. She continued. Alvera survived once I stopped controlling it. Yes. Stonegate became healthier when you stopped treating our marriage as governance. Yes. You got better after you stopped protecting me. Yes. And I got better after nobody protected me from the consequences. That one took me a second. Then I nodded. Yes. She looked toward the lobby. Turns out the empire was mostly dependence. Some of it. Enough. The next morning, Sabrina gave her presentation. I sat in the back. She knew I was there. Her first slide showed a simple diagram. Trust access informal authority unchecked dependence. She talked about founders who mistake loyalty for competence. Staff who become powerful because they control information. Boards that wait too long to define roles. Investors who become emotional backstops. Then she said, I once believed the strongest part of my company was that people would never let me fail. A pause. I was wrong. She changed slides. A healthy system must survive someone saying no. That includes employees, boards, investors, spouses. The room became quiet. She did not tell the Jackson Hole story in detail. She did not need to. Then someone asked from the front row, did losing control make you a better leader? Sabrina smiled. No. The room shifted. She continued. Losing control ended my leadership role. A few people laughed nervously. What made me better was accepting that those were not the same thing. That line stayed with me. After the conference, Sabrina and I said goodbye outside the lodge. No emotional hug. No fantasy about starting over. We had both moved too far for that. She was seeing someone by then. A university professor named Aaron Miles. Not rich. Not in hospitality. She told me once that he had refused to change restaurant reservations because she was 15 minutes late. Apparently that impressed her. I had been dating Claire Sutton, an architect in Denver, for nearly 2 years. No dramatic romance. No revenge marriage. Just a relationship where I did not have to inspect capital structures to know whether I was respected. Sabrina asked about her. How's Claire? Good. You two serious? Yes. She smiled. I'm glad. That was all. No regret written across her face. No last attempt to reclaim me. Her life had become something else. So had mine. Before we separated, Sabrina pointed toward the courtyard. You know what's strange? What? I used to remember that night as the moment you turned against me. And now? I remember it as the moment you stopped protecting me from who I had become. I looked at her. That sounds harsher than I'd say it. It's still true. Maybe. She smiled. Goodbye, Gavin. Goodbye, Sabrina. Then we walked in opposite directions. That should have been the end of the story. But 6 months later, Stonegate held its annual investment retreat. Malcolm was retiring. Evelyn Shaw had joined the board. I had already begun reducing my own day-to-day role. During the final dinner, Malcolm raised a glass. To Gavin. I groaned. No. Yes. He ignored me. To the man who once called an emergency investment committee meeting after walking through snow in a towel. Everyone laughed. I covered my face. Then Malcolm became serious. And who still recused himself from the vote. That changed the room. He continued. That mattered. I knew what he meant. I could have abused my own power. I had motive. Access. Money. Anger. Everything Sabrina had possessed that night. Instead, the committee reviewed the investment. The numbers failed. Then later, when Alvera fixed transactions, we supported them. When the company stabilized, we held. When the investment matured, we sold. No revenge embedded in the portfolio. That was the victory I cared about. Not that Sabrina lost her empire. That I did not become her while leaving it. Years later, people still occasionally sent me the headline. My CEO wife left me naked in the snow. I destroyed her empire. It was a good headline. Violent. Clean. Satisfying. The truth was messier. She left me in the snow. That part happened. I took back my family's capital. That happened too. Her acquisition failed. Her board investigated. Adrian was fired. Sabrina resigned. Her board seat disappeared. Stonegate exited. Her empire, as she understood it, ended. But I never destroyed Elvira. I never took her fortune. I never wanted her ruined. What I destroyed was the assumption underneath everything. That I would always absorb the cost. That Stonegate would always fund the next risk. That marriage meant permanent financial obedience. That love meant no consequence could ever reach her. Once I stopped holding that structure up, everything unsupported fell on its own. And what remained was stronger. Elvira. Stonegate. Sabrina. Me. Even the memory of that night. For years, I thought the snow was the coldest part. It wasn't. The coldest part was realizing my wife believed my loyalty was something she could punish without losing. She was wrong. And once she finally understood that, there was nothing left for me to destroy. I had already taken back the only thing that mattered. My right to say no. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.